With a lot of cold cases, when there's little or no evidence, the only hope the case will ever be solved is if someone comes forward with information. In these cases, the criminals responsible finally confessed to their crimes and explained what really happened to their victims. Number 5. On September 9, 1987, the body of 37-year-old Ige Sober Adler was discovered in a field in Fairfax, Virginia. More than 30 years later, a confession would finally solve this cold case and the unsolved case of another woman. When Charles Hellam confessed to taking the lives of Ige Sober Adler and Jennifer Landry, he was already in prison serving a life sentence. In 2002, he took the life of his ex-girlfriend, and he already had a history of violence. But the police didn't realize just how dangerous this man was. Hellam was just 18 years old when he took Ige's life. Her body was discovered behind a Days Inn in Fairfax, Virginia. Investigators confirmed she'd lost her life the day before. When her car was later discovered on Dulles Toll Road, it seemed likely she'd had car trouble, which led to her running into the criminal responsible. Her case went cold and had faded in most people's memories by the time 18-year-old Jennifer Landry's body was discovered in 2002. Jennifer was last seen alive in New York City, but was apparently hitchhiking around the Northwest. 2 weeks after she was last seen alive, her body was discovered in a wooded area not far from Washington, D.C. She had been attacked and tied up with an electrical cord. It took 3 years to identify the woman as Jennifer, but finding her identity didn't lead police any closer to discovering the person who had done this. Not long after Jennifer's body was discovered, Charles Hellam was arrested. His ex-girlfriend, Patricia Bentley, was found in her home no longer alive. Hellam had broken up with his girlfriend weeks earlier but still had access to her home and regularly used the gym equipment there. When questioned by police, he denied any contact with Patricia for weeks and said that he didn't have access to her home. These were both quickly determined to be a lie. He was found guilty of taking her life in late 2003. Nobody connected the two previous unsolved cases to Hellam. While he had a violent history, his victims so far had been women that he'd been in relationships with. He had no connections to Ige or Jennifer. But while behind bars, Hellam twice wrote to detectives to say that he wanted to confess to other crimes. Both times he seemed to have a change of heart, but in 2021, he finally confessed to the crimes. He told police he had picked Jennifer up in Washington, D.C., then had driven her to the location where he took her life. He emphasized the fact that he'd been a truck driver, and it seemed clear this was how he came across his victims. He also gave information on Ige's case. Police were confident the information he was giving them was information only the criminal responsible could know. He was charged with both crimes and later pleaded guilty. Detectives are now working to figure out if there are any other unsolved cases Hellam could be responsible for. It might be a case of waiting to see if there are any more confessions to come. Number 4. On March 10, 2019, Roger Lloyd Taylor vanished without a trace. His family couldn't get answers in this unsolved disappearance until a confession in 2022. Roger was an 18-year-old father of 4 when he went missing in 2019. On the evening of March 10th, Roger and his wife got into an argument. His wife left the house with Roger's daughter, Tiffany, and went to Tiffany's home in Monroe County, Mississippi. Roger stayed at his home in Lamar County, Alabama for a short while before he decided to follow his wife and daughter. Not long after he crossed state lines, he apparently got lost. He sent a taxi to Tiffany to say he was lost and stuck. Roger never arrived at Tiffany's home and was never seen again. The family reported Roger missing not long after his disappearance. His car was found 2 days later on Blair Cemetery Road. It wasn't far from Tiffany's home, but Roger may not have known that. There were footprints around the car, but they didn't lead investigators in any direction. Roger's family appealed for help in finding him. The disappearance made local news channels, and a number of Roger's acquaintances joined in on the search for him. One of those was James Eric Crisp. Crisp wasn't close friends with Roger. They'd actually been introduced by another one of Roger's daughters, Brienne, who had dated Crisp's best friend. After the disappearance, Crisp tried to help search for Roger and told Brienne that whoever had done this didn't deserve to live. At this point, the family still had some hope that he was still alive. There was also the possibility that he'd had an accident. Roger had a number of health problems and previously had multiple strokes, which damaged the left side of his body. An accident seemed more likely than someone having done this to him, but Crisp seemed certain of that. A few weeks after Roger vanished, Crisp was arrested for charges relating to illegal substances. He faced 30 years behind bars, but instead went to a rehabilitation facility and found religion. He became a pastor at a home for others recovering from substance problems. According to Crisp, religion also drove him to confess to taking Roger's life. Details of the crime haven't been made public, but Crisp walked into the local police station and told the officer that he had taken Roger's life after an altercation and hidden his body. He was allegedly cooperating with police to help locate the body. Brienne doesn't believe Crisp is remorseful, and there are rumors that he only confessed because one of Crisp's own children had threatened to go to the police. Police have taken Crisp's confession as evidence, but are continuing to investigate. It's possible more than one person was involved in Roger's disappearance, and finding his body remains a priority. Number 3. In September of 2001, Janet Luxford disappeared without a trace. She left behind 3 children, 2 of whom were adults, who spent the next 20 years questioning why their mother would abandon them. It was only after a confession in 2022 that they learned the chilling truth. Janet was 41 years old when she disappeared, and there was a lot of change going on in Janet's life. For years before she vanished, she had lived in Jacksonville, Florida with her youngest daughter Amanda and her husband. But in early 2001, she had begun working at a hotel. It was there that she met Brian Jones, a truck driver who was staying at the hotel. The two began dating, and Janet fell back into old habits, including the use of illegal substances. It was September when Amanda returned home from school to find her mother's belongings and lots of sentimental items had all disappeared. Janet's family would soon learn Jones had convinced her to travel with her, and they headed towards Alabama. The last time anybody spoke to Janet was on September 22nd. Her elder daughter, Marie, had called Janet and the two argued. It would be about a year later that Marie reported her mother missing. She hadn't spoken to her since the last argument, and now they couldn't get through to her. Jones was brought in for questioning, but apparently could offer no clues as to what happened. For decades, Janet's children believed she may still have been alive. Given her substance problems, they thought it might have been the reason that she'd stayed away. Darker thoughts about kidnapping also seeped in. The question was finally answered in 2022. In Bessemer, Alabama, Jones called the police to say that he had taken Janet's life all those years ago in the same city. According to Jones, it had been an accident. They'd gotten into an argument because Janet wanted money to travel back to Florida. Jones had hit her with a golf club. After she passed away, he put her body in a green suitcase and abandoned it in a remote part of Bessemer. Remarkably, when he led police to the suitcase, it was still there, untouched, with Janet's remains inside. According to Jones, he'd thought about confessing to the crime multiple times, but hadn't wanted to disappoint his parents. It was only after they passed away that he finally confessed. The exact date of when the crime happened is still unclear. Janet's daughters both remember speaking to her on September 22nd, which was Janet's youngest daughter's birthday. Jones claims the crime happened in February, on the day Dale Earnhardt passed away in a NASCAR racing accident. Police are still working to confirm the body is indeed Janet, but this case is presumed closed after the out-of-the-blue confession. Number 2. In 2021, police announced an infamous cold case had finally been solved after the criminal responsible confessed to his crime. That criminal, Paul Apodaca, now awaits trial for taking the life of Caitlin Arquette. At about 11 p.m. on July 16, 1989, police arrived at the scene of what looked like a traffic accident. A red Ford Tempo had hit a light pole in Albuquerque, New Mexico. When police investigated, they found the driver was still in the car. She had been struck with 2 bullets. A third had struck the door pillar. The driver was 18-year-old Caitlin Arquette, the daughter of thriller author Louis Duncan. Caitlin had been driving back to her mother's house when the incident occurred. Now, police believed that whoever had attacked Caitlin had pulled up alongside her at the red light and then fired. Caitlin passed away less than 24 hours later in the hospital, and she never woke up. Police believed this was a random attack. Someone was looking for a victim when they came across a pretty young woman in a red car and decided that she would be it. Caitlin's family wasn't so sure. Caitlin had been dating a man named Dung Nguyen at the time. They had moved into an apartment together 6 weeks earlier. For most of that time, Caitlin's family had thought that they got on fine. Shortly before the incident, Caitlin told them that they'd been having major problems, which had started not long after they moved in together. On the day of the crime, Caitlin had a fight with Dung. She'd left the apartment and driven to her parents' home. There, she said she was going to have dinner with the female friend and said that she would either stay with the friend or return home. She had gone to dinner but decided to head home, which was when the crime occurred. Dung was distraught when the police told him about the crime. He had stayed at her bed until she passed away. A few days later, Dung tried to take his own life but survived the attempt. Caitlin's mother believed Dung knew what happened. It would emerge that Dung and his friends had been part of a criminal organization scamming car insurance companies with fake accidents. Her family believed Caitlin knew too much about the scheme and that they had decided to take her out. Meanwhile, police arrested 2 men after a tip from a third, who said that he'd been in the back of the car when his friends attacked Caitlin. It would later emerge that the lead had been false and the men were released. The case went cold, but Caitlin's family never gave up the search. They hired private investigators who discovered another line of inquiry that hadn't been followed. Paul Apodaca had been one of the first people on the scene. He happened to be driving by when he saw the accident. His car matched the description given by witnesses as being close to the scene of the crime. Investigators believed that he knew a lot more than he let on, but he denied any involvement in the case. That was until July of 2021. He was arrested by University of New Mexico campus police for violating parole. He already had convictions for dangerous crimes, which at the time dated back to the 1990s. Almost immediately, he confessed to taking Caitlin's life and the lives of 2 other people. Caitlin was his 3rd victim. The 2 other victims lost their lives in 1988. During his confession, he gave police details only the criminal responsible could know. However, his lawyer later claimed that he only confessed because he was intoxicated and mentally ill. But he's currently awaiting trial. Number 1. In 2008, Michael Townsend was imprisoned for taking the life of his childhood friend the year before. While in prison, he finally confessed to a crime that had been cold for 3 decades. The victim was Linda Lewis Little. She vanished without a trace in the early hours of October 11, 1991, just a few weeks before her 44th birthday. Linda had a waitressing job in her hometown of Daytona Beach. She left work on October 10th in a good mood and rode her bicycle to another bar, where she caught up with friends. She was excited about the upcoming weekend. It would be her first anniversary with her boyfriend, and they were going on a trip. At the bar, she showed friends where they would be going. When the bar closed, Linda left. She was later seen at 2 a.m. at a convenience store where she bought a donut and chocolate milk. This would be the last confirmed sighting of her. Linda was reported missing a few days later after she missed shifts at work. It was very much unlike her to not contact anybody beforehand. Police found nothing missing from her apartment and found no signs as to where she might have gone. They did discover that the trip she had planned with her boyfriend had been canceled the afternoon before she went missing. He had told her that he wanted to go fishing instead. It's not clear if Linda was hoping to convince him to go on the trip or just wanted to keep up appearances for friends. The situation with her boyfriend became even murkier. When it emerged, he was already married. Linda's family believed that she didn't know about the marriage, as they couldn't believe she would date a married man. The boyfriend was never named as a suspect, and the case went cold. Linda's case likely would have stayed cold were it not for Townsend's confession. Townsend had spent much of his life in and out of prison. He had actually only recently been released when he took the life of Sherry Lynn Carmen in January of 2007. Sherry was a childhood friend who offered him a place to stay when he was on parole. Townsend took her life and hid her body in the family laundry room. He was later handed a whole life sentence for the crime. While in prison, he decided it was time to get things off his chest and confessed to taking the lives of at least 3 other women. Linda was one of the women. He described meeting her at a bar in Daytona and taking her life after a fight. The 2 other women have not been named. Townsend pleaded guilty to taking Linda's life and was given another life sentence. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.